The most dangerous financial mistake happening in America right now isn't reckless spending. It isn't impulsive decisions or ignored debt. It's responsible saving, done exactly the way you were taught, by exactly the people who are doing everything right. Here's what that looks like. You opened a savings account, you set up automatic transfers. Every month a little more goes in quietly, consistently, the way disciplined people handle money. You check the balance, the number grows, and somewhere in the back of your mind a quiet voice says you're doing it right. That voice isn't wrong about your discipline, but it's completely wrong about where you're standing. Because that safety net you've been building, the one that represents years of sacrifice and careful decisions, is being measured in the wrong unit. You're counting dollars. The world is charging you in purchasing power. And those two things stopped being the same number a long time ago. This isn't about people who are careless with money. This is about people who are careful, people who budget, people who save, people who follow the conventional financial playbook and still quietly wonder why it never feels like enough. Every month that passes without understanding how inflation interacts with your savings strategy, the gap widens, not dramatically, not in a way that shows up on a bank statement. Slowly, the way a financial safety net's threads thin over years of carrying weight they weren't designed for. You don't see the damage until you actually need it to hold. And by then, the problem isn't that you weren't saving. It's that you were saving in a structure that was quietly working against you the entire time. In the next few minutes, we're going to walk through 3 specific savings patterns that feel like protection but actually accelerate that erosion. Then we're going to show you what real capital preservation looks like structurally. Not investment tips, not risky moves, just the architecture of a financial safety net that actually holds. Here's the number that changes everything. The national average interest rate for a traditional savings account sits somewhere between 0.01% and 0.5% annually. Inflation in the United States has averaged around 2.9% over the past 12 months. That's not a gap, that's a slow bleed. If your emergency fund earns 0.5% while prices rise at nearly 3%, you're losing over 2% of real purchasing power every single year. On a $20,000 emergency fund, that's roughly $400 in real value gone silently, without a single line on your bank statement showing a negative number. The balance grew, the safety net shrank. And it's been doing this every year you've kept money there. The first savings pattern that destroys careful people is the static emergency fund. Most people build their fund to a number: 3 months of expenses, 6 months, and then they stop. They consider it done, protected. But here's what they miss. The cost of those 3 months of living is not the same number it was 2 years ago. Groceries cost more, utilities cost more, insurance premiums cost more. The emergency fund stays fixed while the emergency it was designed to cover gets more expensive every single year. You haven't been protecting your future. You've been protecting a snapshot of 2022, and that snapshot has been aging since the day you stopped adjusting it. The second pattern is comfort-based paralysis. The fear of financial risk leads many people to keep far more liquid cash than their actual emergency situation requires, sometimes 2 or 3 times more than necessary. And every extra dollar sitting in a standard savings account earning near zero interest is a dollar running a quiet deficit against inflation. The uncomfortable irony is this: the more careful you are, the more you stockpile for security, the more purchasing power you lose over time. Caution in this specific case becomes the mechanism of erosion. It doesn't feel like a mistake. That's exactly what makes it dangerous. The third pattern is the most invisible, the false comfort of a stable number. You look at your account balance. It's higher than last year, it grew, so the instinct says I'm fine. But real financial security isn't about whether the number grows. It's about whether it grows faster than the cost of everything that number is supposed to protect you from. A balance that increases 1% while prices increase 3% is a balance that is functionally shrinking. The display says growth. The reality says erosion. That gap between the number you see and the protection it actually provides is where most middle-class savings quietly disappear. Here's the shift that changes how you see a financial safety net permanently. A net is not defined by how much rope it's made of. It's defined by whether it can hold your weight when you actually fall. And the weight you're going to fall with, the real cost of a job loss, a medical emergency, a car failure, that weight increases every year. Your safety net does not automatically grow with it. Not unless you design it to. Most people measure financial security by the size of their savings. Real financial security is measured by coverage ratio. Does what you have actually cover what you need in today's dollars, at today's prices, with today's cost of living? You've probably heard the standard advice your entire life: keep 3 to 6 months of expenses in an emergency fund. But that rule was designed for an economic era where inflation ran at 1.5% annually and savings accounts returned 4%. Those numbers don't exist right now. The advice survived, but the math that made it work didn't. Following a protection strategy built for a different economy doesn't mean you're being responsible. It means you're being loyal to something that no longer protects you. Here's the part that's hardest to sit with. For most people watching this, that erosion has already been happening, not for 1 month, not for 1 year, but for several years. The financial safety net you think you have, the one that took real discipline and real sacrifice to build, is already thinner than it looks. That's not a failure. It's just the result of leaving money in the wrong structure for the wrong amount of time, without anyone ever pointing out that the structure itself had a flaw. The question isn't whether it happened. The question is whether you build differently going forward. Real financial protection is not a number. It's an architecture, and that architecture has 2 layers, not 1. The first layer is true liquidity, 3 to 4 months of your current actual expenses, not what your expenses were when you set up the fund, held in a high-yield savings account that at minimum slows the rate of erosion. This is your instant access protection, the part of the net that catches you immediately when you fall. The second layer is what most people are missing entirely, an inflation-hedged reserve. This is the extended runway, an additional 3 to 6 months of expenses structured to hold real value over time. Not in aggressive investments, not in anything with significant volatility, in instruments specifically designed for capital preservation under inflationary conditions, Treasury I-bonds, short-term Treasury bills, or money market funds with competitive yields. This portion moves slower, but it doesn't quietly shrink. The structural adjustment itself is not complicated. The one change with the highest impact and lowest disruption is this: audit your emergency fund against your current cost of living, not the cost of living from when you set it up. Recalculate what 3 to 6 months of expenses actually costs you today. Then look at what your fund is actually earning in annual interest. If that gap is larger than 2 percentage points, you're running a quiet deficit inside your financial safety net. And now you know exactly where to start closing it. The person who understands this doesn't necessarily move money tomorrow, but they stop looking at their balance as the answer. The balance becomes the first question: is this number still doing the job it was built to do? Because that question, asked consistently, is what separates a financial safety net that holds from one that looks intact until the moment it matters most. There's one more dimension to this conversation that very few financial discussions ever reach: how lifestyle inflation quietly raises the weight your safety net has to carry, even when your savings habits stay completely the same. If that's the invisible gap in your current strategy, the next video addresses it directly. But the architecture we covered today is the foundation. Without it, nothing else in your financial plan is built on solid ground.